Join me in the Pledge of Allegiance.
And to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, Madam Secretary, would you please introduce today's agenda?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning to you. Good morning, Commissioners. For today's meeting, you will hear 6 items for your consideration. First, you will consider a notice of proposed rulemaking that proposes a range of actions that will improve customer service and consumer protection. Second, you will consider a notice of proposed rulemaking on combating illegal robocalls through FCC numbering policies. Third, you will consider a report and order that adopts measures to modernize network and communication services. Fourth, you will consider a notice of proposed rulemaking to make additional spectrum available for emergent space operations. Fifth, you will consider a report and order, direct final rule, and further notice of proposed rulemaking modernizing the FCC's suspension and debarment rules. Sixth, you will consider a direct final rule rescinding obsolete provisions impacting the Office of Economics and Analytics and the Office of International Affairs. This is your agenda for today. Please note the item listed as number 5 on the Commission's March 19 Sunshine Notice, entitled Amendment of Parts 173, 74, and 76 of the Commission's rules to update rules applicable to broadcast stations, delete, was adopted by the Commission and deleted from today's agenda. Today's first item is titled Improving Customer Service and Consumer Protection and will be presented by the Consumer and Governmental Affairs Bureau. Edward Bartolome, Bureau Chief, will give the introduction.
Thank you, Madam Secretary. Chief, when you're ready, please proceed.
Good morning, Chairman and Commissioners. Today, I am pleased to introduce, on behalf of the Consumer and Governmental Affairs Bureau, an item that, if adopted, would ensure that consumers of communication services receive better customer service while improving job opportunities for Americans. Before turning the presentation over to my colleagues, I would like to thank the media, wireline competition, wireless telecommunications, enforcement, and public safety and homeland security bureaus, as well as the Office of Economics and Analytics, Communications Business Opportunities, General Counsel, and International Affairs for their valuable assistance. Joining me at the table today are John B. Adams, Special Counsel in CGB's Consumer Policy Division, and Wes Platt, Chief of the Consumer Policy Division. John will present the item.
Good morning, Chairman, Commissioners. Over the past few decades, many corporations have shifted their customer service and call center operations to a range of foreign countries. These moves took jobs away from communities across America and created language barriers and other problems that have left consumers frustrated with the customer service they receive from communications providers. They also have created privacy, data protection, and national security issues. And there are a host of call centers overseas being used to flood America with illegal robocalls that cost Americans billions of dollars each year. The notice of proposed rulemaking, if adopted, would propose to address customer service, data privacy, and national security issues caused by communications companies offshoring their operations. The notice would propose 8 specific requirements. First, require communications providers that use foreign call centers to ensure that all calling staff at those centers are proficient in both written and spoken American Standard English. Second, limit the percentage of customer service calls that providers may make from or answer at foreign call centers. Third, require providers to inform customers at the beginning of each call involving a foreign call center that the call is being handled outside of the United States. Fourth, require providers to transfer calls to a call center located within the United States upon customer request. Fifth, require providers to handle certain types of consumer transactions only at call centers located within the United States. And sixth, prohibit providers from using call centers or customer service representatives located in foreign adversary nations. Seventh, require additional provider transparency, including a disclosure on broadband labels of the percentage of calls handled by foreign call centers. And eighth, require providers to file compliance reports. The notice also seeks comment on whether the Commission should consider applying the proposed rules to non-voice communications, such as online chat, text, and electronic mail messages that are handled in foreign customer service centers. In addition, to strengthen accountability, the notice seeks comment on requiring bonds or fees to prevent illegal robocallers from defrauding and harassing consumers. The Consumer and Governmental Affairs Bureau recommends adoption of the item and respectfully requests editorial privileges. Thank you.
Thank you for the presentation. We'll now turn to comments from the bench, starting with Commissioner Gomez.
Thank you. Given that we recently celebrated National Consumer Protection Week, I'm glad we are thinking about consumers. I believe this FCC does best when our work honors the people we serve. That is why I support action by this FCC that honors consumers' concerns. Consumers rely on customer support lines to solve problems they experience with communication services. Thus, questions about how to improve the customer service experience are within our remit and a meaningful way to ensure we continue to serve the public. I look forward to hearing from consumers about the proposals we present today, as well as from service providers about the extensive new regulations with which they would be required to comply. I believe a robust record would help us better understand the scope of the problem consumers face, the industry efforts already underway, and the right incentives to encourage industry to improve customer service. I want to thank the Office of the Chairman for working with me on edits to the NPRM, and I thank the Bureau as well for your work on this item.
Commissioner, we'll now turn to comments from Commissioner Trusty.
Thank you. March 10th marked the 150th anniversary of the first telephone call, and it goes without saying that since Alexander Graham Bell's historic breakthrough, communications technologies have advanced dramatically, benefiting consumers in myriad ways. Notwithstanding these advancements, bad actors have kept pace with technology, changing business practices, and other evolutions in the communications marketplace. We've seen fraudsters and scammers develop new, sophisticated ways to exploit vulnerabilities in communications networks and the broader digital ecosystem for their own gain and unjust enrichment. These malicious activities can reduce consumer trust and ultimately slow the adoption of modern communication services and stall future innovation. A trusted, reliable, and secure communications ecosystem is paramount to ensuring that consumers continue to benefit from a dynamic marketplace where innovation and investment can thrive. And so I welcome today's NPRM to address risks to Americans that originate from call centers located overseas. In particular, I appreciate the notice's focus on protecting the privacy and security of consumers' sensitive information and proposing ways to more proactively identify and mitigate threats before they impact American consumers. The proposals in this item mark another important step forward by this Commission to enhance trust in our communications ecosystem and build consumer confidence to adopt new services, which will ultimately create a stronger foundation for innovation. I thank the Consumer and Governmental Affairs Bureau for your hard work on this item.
Americans get frustrated when they call a U.S. business only to end up connecting with a call center located somewhere abroad. Too often, foreign call centers have meant confusing customer service, delayed support, and even security risks. In many cases, scammers get trained at legitimate call centers overseas and either access your data illegally or take their training to a foreign illegal robocall operation. It's time for this offshoring to end. American consumers deserve call centers that speak proficient English, provide clear answers, and are based here at home, not halfway around the world. So today, the FCC is taking action to change the present situation. We adopt proposals aimed at reshoring call center jobs and improving the customer service experience at the ones that remain, including by seeking comment on requiring call center workers to be proficient in American Standard English. I'm pleased that many providers already have U.S.-only call center operations or are committed to doing so. For instance, Charter recently announced that they will be onshoring the call center jobs that the cable company recently acquired through a merger. With this vote today, the FCC will also be opening up a new front in our efforts to block illegal robocalls from abroad by examining the targeted use of fees or bonds. Specifically, we're identifying ways to address illegal robocall scams that originate inside foreign call centers, such as ways we can take the profit out of those operations. For all their great work on this item, I'd like to thank the Bureau teams, including Chief Bartholomew, Mark Stone, Wes Platt, John Adams, Robert Aldrich, Aaron Garza, Chris Laughlin, Jonathan Lecter, Daniel Stepanich, and Kim Makich. With that, we'll proceed to a vote on the item. Commissioner?
Approve.
Commissioner Trustee?
Approve.
The chair votes to approve as well. The item is adopted with editorial privileges as requested. And Madam Secretary, will you please announce the next item on today's agenda?
Mr. Chairman and Commissioners, item 2 on your agenda is titled Combating Illegal Robocalls Through FCC Numbering Policies and will be presented by the Wireline Competition Bureau. Joseph Calishone, Bureau Chief, will give the introduction.
Thank you. Chief, when you and your team are ready, please proceed.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and Commissioners. The Wireline Competition Bureau is pleased to present for your consideration a notice of proposed rulemaking that, if adopted, would take another important step in the fight against illegal robocalling. I'd like to thank the Wireline team for their hard work on this item, as well as our colleagues throughout the Commission. This item is a cross-agency effort, and we appreciate the collaboration. With me at the table today are Kara Voth, Deputy Bureau Chief, Jody May, Chief of the Bureau's Competition Policy Division, Ed Kratchmer, Deputy Chief of the Competition Policy Division, and Raphael Schneider, Attorney Advisor, who will now present the item.
Thank you, Joseph, and good morning, Mr. Chairman and Commissioners. If adopted, today's notice of proposed rulemaking would explore and propose a broad array of solutions to strengthen the Commission's numbering requirements and policies, particularly relating to resellers that use numbering resources to engage in some of the most extensive illegal robocalling schemes. It would propose to extend the Commission's robocall certification requirements, currently applicable to interconnected VoIP providers seeking direct access to numbering resources, to all service providers that receive numbering resources directly from the North American Numbering Plan Administrator, and also to resellers of telephone numbers. Additionally, it would seek comment on proposals to modify reporting requirements in the numbering utilization forecast form to obtain more granular information regarding utilization, better detect irregularities, aid robocall enforcement efforts, and better inform the Commission's numbering policies. It would also seek comment on a proposal to restrict numbering resale to only a single level to avoid masking the identities of the parties in interest that may indeed be responsible for illegal robocalls, as well as the parties with relevant data, both of which take place when there are multiple levels of resale. In addition, it would seek comment on how the Commission's numbering policies could and should address illegal robocallers that rely on number cycling, that is, going through large quantities of telephone numbers on a rotating or even a single-use basis to evade robocall detection. Finally, the notice of proposed rulemaking would seek comment on new ways in which the Commission, with assistance from the states and the North American Numbering Plan Administrator, can better identify fraudulent use and misuse of telephone numbers, as well as seek comment on other changes that could safeguard against abuse of numbering resources and further deter robocalling. The Bureau recommends adoption of this item and respectfully requests editorial privileges. Thanks.
Thanks for the presentation. We'll now hear comments from the bench, starting with Commissioner Gomez.
I'm glad to see the Commission fulfill one of its core oversight responsibilities by strengthening safeguards against harmful and illegal robocalls, the #1 consumer complaint at the FCC. The item before us would extend our reach to resellers of telephone numbers for the first time and propose stronger tracking of how numbers move through the system. Right now, bad actors are exploiting gaps in a phone number system that was designed for a simpler time. These proposals would close these gaps by requiring more accountability from every company that touches a phone number and giving regulators and law enforcement a much clearer picture of where numbers are going and who is using them. These are common sense steps that are long overdue, and I'm proud to support this ongoing bipartisan effort on behalf of consumers. Thank you to the chairman and to the Wireline Competition Bureau for your work on this item.
Thank you, Commissioner. We'll now hear from Commissioner Trusty.
Thank you. Marketplace developments, including the transition to IP-based networks, have delivered significant benefits for consumers. At the same time, these technical and marketplace changes have made it more difficult to identify who is using telephone numbers and for what purposes, complicating both robocall enforcement and numbering administration more broadly. During this month's National Consumer Protection Week, the Commission highlighted a variety of emerging scams targeting Americans. Raising consumer awareness is critical to fraud prevention, but as the Commission has long recognized, consumers should not have to shoulder this burden alone. Taking steps to shape adversary behavior and disrupt harmful activity before it reaches the public is key to our public safety, national security, and economic prosperity. Consistent with that approach, this notice appropriately seeks comment on actions the FCC can take to better align industry practices with accountability and transparency, and to close gaps that bad actors exploit to avoid oversight, both from regulators and the marketplace. Just as service providers and state authorities are essential partners in broader network security efforts, this NPRM also explores ways to reinforce the important role providers play in protecting their customers from scams, and to strengthen information sharing and coordination with our state partners involved in numbering administration. Combating scams and illegal robocalls requires the Commission to use every tool at its disposal. I look forward to working with my colleagues and stakeholders to advance solutions that can help establish an enduring trust in our nation's communications networks. And I thank the Wireline Competition Bureau for your great work on this item.
Thank you, Commissioner. Over the past year, we've been taking a new approach to combating illegal robocalls by tackling the problem at every point in the call path. Today's action supports those ongoing efforts by making it harder for bad actors to obtain numbering resources. After all, if bad actors can't get phone numbers in the first place, it's a lot harder for them to generate illegal robocalls. The Enforcement Bureau has found that the majority of its robocall investigations have involved resold phone numbers. So today, we're looking at how those bad actors are obtaining numbers and proposing ways to restrict them. Specifically, we seek comment on restricting the resale of numbers to a single level to prevent the types of abuses we've been seeing in the marketplace up to now. With today's action, we'll also build on our work from December by proposing to extend our robocall certification requirements to all service providers that receive numbering resources directly from the NAMPA and also to resellers. Ultimately, our goal is to restore confidence in the nation's voice networks. Americans should be able to answer their phones without fear of being scammed or defrauded. Today's action moves us closer to that goal, and I look forward to continuing our work staying ahead of the evolving tactics used by illegal robocallers. For all their great work, I'd like to thank the team again, especially Kara Voth, Jody May, Ed Kratchmer, Bill Androl, Jonathan Lecter, our presenter Raphael, John Pedersen, Mace Wachalou, Rick Mallon, Derek Yo, Michael Scott, Genesis Montserrat, Daniel Stepanich, and Joseph Calashone, Chief. Thank you all again. We'll now turn to a vote, starting with Commissioner Gomez.
Approve.
Commissioner Trusty.
Approve.
The chair votes to approve as well. The item is adopted with editorial privileges as requested. Madam Secretary, please announce the next item on today's agenda.
Mr. Chairman and Commissioners, item 3 on your agenda is titled Modernizing Network and Communication Services and will also be presented by the Wireline Competition Bureau. Joseph Calashone, Chief of the Bureau, will give the introduction.
Chief, you're still settled, so
I'm still here.
when the next team comes in, please proceed.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and Commissioners. The Bureau is pleased to present for your consideration a report and order that would remove regulatory barriers that reduce investment in, and slow down the transition from aging and deteriorating copper networks to modern IP-based networks. I'd like to thank the entire Bureau team for their dedicated work on this item, as well as our colleagues in the Consumer, Public Safety, and Wireless Bureaus, and the Offices of Communications Business Opportunities, Economics and Analytics, and General Counsel for their contributions and review. Seated at the table with me are Jody Griffin, Deputy Bureau Chief, and from the Competition Policy Division, Jody May, Division Chief, Michelle Burlove, Assistant Chief, and Marie Bordelon, Attorney Advisor, who will now present the item.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and Commissioners. This report and order, if adopted, would adopt a set of common sense reforms and core consumer protections that would bring the regulatory environment in line with today's communications marketplace while retaining and adopting safeguards to protect public safety and ensure 911 continuity. First, the report and order would eliminate all filing requirements in the Commission's network change disclosure rules while retaining the statutory public notice requirement. Next, it would simplify the process for technology transitions by adopting one consolidated rule applicable to all technology transitions discontinuance applications and eliminating rule provisions thereby rendered irrelevant. The report and order would further ease burdens by allowing carriers to grandfather legacy voice services, lower speed data telecommunication services, and interconnected VoIP service provisioned over copper wire, and adopt clear requirements for applications to discontinue a service supporting interconnection trunks or the exchange of traffic to ensure seamless 911 connectivity. Next, the report and order would revise the Commission's emergency discontinuance rules to permit permanent discontinuance of a service for which the carrier has received emergency discontinuance authorization to support service modernization during recovery efforts. It would then delete various irrelevant, redundant, or obsolete discontinuance rules. Finally, the report and order would find that any state or local statute, regulation, or other legal requirement that either by law or in practice has the effect of continuing to require carriers to provide legacy services in an area where carriers have obtained Commission authorization to discontinue, conflicts with federal law and Commission policy, and is subject to preemption. The Bureau recommends adoption of this item and requests editorial privileges. Thank you.
Thank you, Marie, for the presentation. We'll now hear comments from the bench, starting with Commissioner Gomez.
Today, the Commission takes a meaningful step in modernizing our regulatory framework for the transition away from legacy copper telephone networks to IP-based services. Our nation's copper infrastructure is aging, it's costly to maintain, and it's increasingly vulnerable to theft and natural disaster. The future is IP-based, and our rules should facilitate, not obstruct, carriers' ability to build it. I also want to recognize that this proceeding generated a serious and substantive record. Carriers, public safety advocates, rural providers, competitive carriers, and consumer organizations each engaged with the hard questions this transition raises. The Commission is better for that engagement, and it shows in this order. I'm pleased to support this item, and I want to thank the Chairman for his willingness to work collaboratively to strengthen the public safety, consumer, and competition safeguards in it. The transition from legacy copper to IP-based services is not a uniform experience. Those who are most affected are often in rural, remote, tribal, and low-income communities where alternatives are least mature and the consequences of a gap in service are most severe. Getting the public safety, consumer protection, and competition pieces right matters enormously, and I am pleased that after working through some of our requested edits, this order strikes the right balance between moving the transition forward, protecting our nation's 911 network, which has special considerations as the states migrate to next-generation 911 services, fostering a robust and competitive market for the services that will replace legacy voice, and ensuring no one is left without a path forward when their service changes. One concrete example of our collaboration with the Chair's office is worth highlighting. This order now establishes a centralized docket where consumers can file objections and track concerns related to service discontinuances. And it requires carriers to include notice of that docket and how to access it when notifying consumers about planned discontinuance. It also directs the relevant bureaus to update consumer-facing pages on the Commission's website so that people know how to use the docket, how to file, and how to access express filing processes. That is a practical, meaningful step, A consumer who receives notice that their existing phone service is going away should also receive clear information about where to go if something goes wrong. This order now ensures that. Of course, we recognize that not all consumers have ready access to the internet or the resources to navigate these processes on their own. With our assistance, we hope that consumer advocates, community organizations, and state and local partners will help ensure that those consumers are also able to make their voices heard. I also want to recognize the important role that states play in protecting consumers, safeguarding public safety, and combating fraud. States are often the first line of defense for consumers navigating problems with their communication services, and their authority in these areas is not diminished by this action today. The preemption framework adopted here is appropriately scoped to the discontinuance of interstate and jurisdictionally mixed services and does not reach consumer protection laws, state universal service obligations, or state authority over 911 service. That is the right line to draw. The Commission has seen firsthand how powerful the federal and state partnership can be, including through our memoranda of understanding with state attorneys general to combat illegal robocalls. That same spirit of partnership will be essential as this transition unfolds, and I look forward to continuing to build on it. I want to thank the chairman for the collaborative process through which we were able to work together to ensure consumers are not left behind as this transition unfolds. And I also want to express my sincere appreciation to the Wireline Competition Bureau for their careful and thorough work on a genuinely complex rulemaking and for their time walking me and my staff through our questions. I look forward to continuing to work together.
Thank you, Commissioner. And we'll now hear comments from Commissioner Trusty.
Thank you. Like few other areas of communications policy, the IP transition brings together a range of issues, including connectivity, innovation, public safety, and consumer protection. Addressing any one aspect requires the Commission to remain mindful of the broader ecosystem. Even as we look to the future and the foundation for advanced technologies like artificial intelligence, the same principle applies, requiring a focus on sustained innovation, robust and resilient connectivity, and a common sense approach to regulation. That is the balance the Commission is striving to achieve in the IP transition. This approach, sometimes described as smart deregulation, involves removing outdated or unduly burdensome requirements that hinder the deployment of advanced communication services while preserving core protections for consumers, public safety, and national security. Building on the Wireline Competition Bureau's initial efforts, this item provides greater clarity and predictability for service providers, navigating technology transitions while preserving opportunities for stakeholders to raise concerns in the rare cases where issues may arise. I appreciate this item highlighting the tools Americans rely upon to access emergency assistance, foremost among them the ability to call 911. As networks evolve, ensuring reliable 911 connectivity must remain a top priority. I'm pleased that this item takes steps to require coordination with 911 authorities and key service providers before a service discontinuance request is filed, helping to keep public safety front of mind throughout the transition. The IP transition holds tremendous promise for consumers and will position the United States to lead globally in new communications technologies and services. As we move from legacy networks to next-generation infrastructure, protecting existing consumer interests along the way is key to expanding our innovation capacity and delivering the economic benefits of these technology developments to all Americans. I look forward to continuing to work with Commission staff, industry, and stakeholders to strike the right balance. And I thank the Wireline Competition Bureau for your very hard work on this important item. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Today's FCC decision marks an important step in accelerating America's transition to modern, high-speed networks. For too long, outdated regulations forced providers to maintain aging copper infrastructure and to keep consumers on broken, antiquated networks. It's time for this to end. One provider alone reports that they've been spending about $6 billion a year maintaining copper lines for a dwindling number of customers. This vote effectively frees up those billions of dollars so that Americans can benefit from an upgrade to the types of modern, high-speed networks that they want and need. At the same time, we take a balanced approach that protects consumers and preserves access to critical services like 911. Our updated rules ensure that Americans will still have reliable access to the voice services they've relied on for public safety communications and everyday communications alike, and at prices that remain comparable to what they pay today. In other words, we're advancing modernized networks while making sure that no one is left behind. Today's item also sends a clear signal. Bad actors can't use outdated state and local requirements to undermine the federal policies the FCC codifies today. Requirements that would leave communities stuck on aging copper will be preempted so that Americans in every community benefit from new investment in next-gen networks. I'd like to thank my colleagues in particular. This was a good old-fashioned, bipartisan, collaborative compromise. We had a lot of really good ideas that came both from Commissioner Gomez and Commissioner Trustee. So I really want to thank them in particular for their good faith work on this. I know it wasn't everything that they would have wanted if they fully had the pen, but I do think the item was improved substantially through that. I know people feel like maybe there should be more chances to collaborate and compromise on items, but at least on this one, we got it right, and I think the item was very much improved from the commissioner's work and from their team's work as well on this. So thanks to my colleagues for that. I also want to thank the staff as well for all their hard work on today's item, including Michelle Burlove, Marie Bordelon, Jody Griffin, Rhonda Lean, John Visklosky, Jody May, Chief Calishone, Milena Barzilai, Sarah Citron, David Firth, and Rachel Waxman. So thanks again for everyone for your work on this and the broader effort to modernize the networks. And with that, we'll proceed to a vote on the item, starting with Commissioner Gomez.
Approve.
Commissioner Trustee?
Approve.
The chair votes to approve as well, and the item is adopted with editorial privileges as requested. Madam Secretary, will you please announce the next item on today's agenda?
Mr. Chairman and Commissioners, item 4 on your agenda is titled Spectrum Abundance for Weird Space Stuff, and we're presented by the Space Bureau. Jay Schwartz, Bureau Chief, will give the introduction.
Chief, a big week of partying for you with Space Week in D.C., so hopefully you're not too bleary-eyed. The space guys can party pretty late into the hours.
All right. Good morning.
When you're ready, please proceed.
Just some commentary there, huh? Good morning, Chairman. Good morning, Commissioners. With me at the table here, I have Brandon Padgett, Stephen Dool, and to present the item, Jamie Ann Fuller.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, Commissioners. Today, the Space Bureau presents a notice of proposed rulemaking to unlock spectrum for emergent space operations, or weird space stuff. There is a shortage of usable spectrum for telemetry, tracking, and command, or TT&C, for spacecraft that are not communication satellites, such as those conducting servicing, assembly, or manufacturing in space, commercial inhabitable space stations, and commercial lunar missions. This item pursues multiple paths to deliver spectrum abundance for these emergent space operations. First, it seeks to leverage existing spectrum allocations by providing regulatory clarity regarding the use of these allocations to support TT&C for emergent space activities. Second, the item explores ways that spectrum bands might be used more intensively by adding a secondary allocation in these bands for TT&C for emergent space operations, including by allowing certain FCC's licensees to lease their exclusively licensed spectrum to Earth station operators that will support emergent spacecraft. Finally, the item seeks comment on whether satellite operators should be authorized by rule to use their FCC licensed satellites and inter-satellite links to provide TT&C and data downlinks to support emergent spacecraft. The Bureau recommends adoption of the item and requests editorial privileges for technical and conforming edits. Thank you.
Thank you, Jamie Ann, for the presentation. We'll now hear comments from the bench, starting with Commissioner Gomez.
The phrase, "it's not rocket science," is commonly used to refer to the ease of a task by comparing it to something incredibly difficult. Rocket science. While rocket science continues to be a challenging study and practice, more and more visionaries are traveling to space to innovate beyond space-based communications. Emergent space operations like private lunar missions, pharmaceutical manufacturing, and satellite servicing are finding their way among the stars. Although these new operations are not providing communication services to the public, they need communication support, and that's where we come in. This NPRM thinks creatively through regulatory options to support emergent space operations, from codifying industry practices to strategically utilizing slivers of spectrum to rethinking our terminology. The Bureau thought carefully about how the FCC can create opportunities for communications that support emergent space operations. It's not weird, it's cool.
Rename it cool space stuff.
Yeah.
I never liked the weird space stuff, to be honest, so cool.
You're gonna throw Jay on the under the bus for that one too? It was our pick. Anyone else you want to throw under the bus while we're in public? So, congratulations to the Bureau for drafting creative policy proposals that help us meet the moment to support space innovation.
Thanks. We will now turn to Commissioner Trusty.
Thank you. 17 years ago, in March 2009, NASA launched the Kepler Space Telescope to survey our region of the Milky Way for Earth-sized, potentially habitable planets. Over the course of its mission, the telescope observed more than 530,000 stars, identified over 2,600 new planets, and revealed possibilities for human existence beyond Earth that ground-based telescopes simply could not detect. Today, much like Kepler once did, a new generation of emergent space operations is pushing the boundaries of what is possible beyond our atmosphere. With the release of the cool, weird space stuff NPRM, the Commission takes a holistic view of the evolving space economy, focusing on commercial operations that do not provide radio communication services directly to the public, but nonetheless depend on spectrum for critical telemetry, tracking, and command-to-control spacecraft. Unlike federal missions such as Kepler, however, these emergent operators cannot rely on federal spectrum for TT&C, and they often face significant regulatory hurdles when attempting to use commercial spectrum, case-by-case reviews, extensive coordination requirements, and resulting delays. Yet despite these hurdles, the scope of these activities continues to expand, ranging from in-space manufacturing and orbital laboratories to private robotic lunar missions and efforts to make space more accessible to humans. Today's item rightly seeks comment on how to address these challenges, including by leveraging existing spectrum allocations, such as fixed satellite service bands for standalone TT&C, and by exploring market-based mechanisms that could enable access to underutilized spectrum held by incumbent licensees. Importantly, this approach aims to expand opportunities for emergent space operators without requiring existing users to compromise their services. This NPRM represents another step in the Commission's ongoing effort to modernize its rules to unlock the full potential of the commercial space economy and reinforce U.S. leadership in this domain. Moreover, the proposals in this item will also help advance broader national interests, including economic competitiveness, national security, and the continued expansion of human discovery. I look forward to the continued work ahead between the public and private sectors to position the United States as the global leader in space policy and innovation. And I thank the Space Bureau for its thoughtful and creative work on this item. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioners. Over the years, the licensing team in the Space Bureau mostly handled applications to operate satellites, which is not too surprising. But the work stream for this team is quickly changing. Just look at the new types of applications that are coming in. SpaceX has announced a plan to launch 1 million data centers into space. StarCloud followed with a plan for 88,000 orbital data centers. And then came Blue Origin with a plan for over 50,000. And it's not just AI compute. Companies are racing to produce energy in space, whether solar or nuclear. Manufacturers are now looking to make pharmaceuticals in space, hopefully the legal kind. The list of unconventional activities in orbit will only continue to increase as the cost of getting mass into orbit continues to decrease. And there's another dynamic at play too. Believe it or not, the environmental conditions in deep, dark space may be better for many industrial projects than they are here back on Earth. All this stuff in space needs spectrum, even though we're not talking about communications satellites. Spectrum provides the necessary link for safety and control operations, or what we call TT&C. Unfortunately, next-gen missions have been constrained by a shortage of predictable commercial spectrum for this type of operation. It's proven to be a real limit on the ability to launch and deploy unconventional services. Today, we tackled that challenge head-on. We propose to clarify for good when cutting-edge missions can use commercial spectrum for TT&C. We explore market-based approaches that can put existing spectrum bands to more intensive use for these purposes. And we examine new spectrum bands that could support cutting-edge missions on a dedicated basis. America's spectrum companies, even the weird ones and the cool ones, need plentiful access to spectrum. With today's action, we continue our spectrum abundance agenda to support our builders in space. So for all their exceptional work on this item, I'd like to thank Stephen Duell, Jamie Ann Fuller, Catherine Medley, Brandon Paget, Sankar Prasad, Janine Poltoneri, and our Chief Jay Schwartz as well. And with that, we'll proceed to a vote on the item, starting with Commissioner Gomez.
Approve.
Commissioner Trusty?
Approve.
The chair votes to approve as well. The item is adopted with editorial privileges as requested. Madam Secretary, will you announce the next item on today's agenda?
Mr. Chairman and Commissioners, item 5 on your agenda is titled Modernizing Suspension and Debarment Rules, and was presented by the Office of the General Counsel. Adam Kandu, General Counsel, will give the introduction.
When we have an item with such a scintillating headline as Modernizing Suspension and Debarment, it's only the Office of General Counsel that is going to be capable enough to present that type of colorful
We are
item.
ready and willing to serve in that.
Yeah. General, when you're ready, please proceed.
The Office of General Counsel is pleased to present for your consideration a report in order, direct final rule, and further notice of proposed rulemaking that significantly expands the Commission's ability to combat waste, fraud, and abuse, and remove bad actors from Commission programs. I thank the team joining me at the table: Chin Yu, Associate General Counsel; Anjali Singh, Assistant General Counsel; Michael Scirato, Special Counsel; Paul Silberthau, Attorney Advisor; and Braden Parker, Legal Counsel. I acknowledge Paula in particular for her tireless efforts on the fraud team for over 20 years. Getting ahead of myself. Paula identified the need for this rulemaking, served as lead drafter, and now is seeing it to the finish line. I also would like to thank several OGC team members, including Chris Santini, Scott Bubelis, Jim Bird, Tom Driscoll, Wizam Naum, Irene Lee, Doug Klein, Dave Conzel, and Michael Jansen. I also wish to acknowledge the contributions of our FCC colleague, Karen Onyeji, formerly of OGC, and would like to thank the numerous colleagues throughout the commission, as well as the Office of Inspector General. It's a nice thing to do, you know. Braden will now present the item.
Thank you, Adam. Good morning, Mr. Chairman and Commissioners. The report in order, if adopted, will provide the agency with another effective tool to protect our programs and to protect our funds from bad actors. First, the item would align our procedures to government-wide practice by codifying the Office of Management and Budget guidelines on suspension and debarment while tailoring them to the unique nature of our programs. As a result, any FCC debarment would extend to programs government-wide. Next, the item would broaden the scope of covered conduct. The basis for a suspension or debarment would not be limited to a criminal conviction or a civil judgment as it is currently, but could also be premised on violations of statutes, regulations, or public agreements, as well as a catch-all for any other cause that is so serious or compelling in nature that it affects a party's present responsibility to conduct business with the government. The item would also expand the scope of covered programs beyond the universal service programs to include TRS and NDB, EDP as well. Additionally, the revised rules would provide more expedited safeguards and allow the agency to cut off funds to potential wrongdoers more quickly by providing flexibility to initiate suspension and debarment as soon as there is sufficient evidence of wrongdoing, meanwhile safeguarding the due process protections. The item would also adopt an additional remedy called a limited denial of participation, which would be an FCC-specific alternative to suspension and debarment. This would permit the agency to fashion appropriate remedies in instances of less egregious or isolated misconduct and would limit participation only in FCC programs. Finally, the item would require disclosures of program participants to the agency in an effort to curtail inadvertent ties to wrongdoers. Additionally, a further notice of proposed rulemaking would propose applying this new suspension and debarment framework to the supply chain reimbursement program, as well as to any future universal service support mechanisms, including new high cost or pilot programs or modernized forms of TRS. The Office of General Counsel recommends adoption of the item and requests editorial privileges. Thank you.
Thank you, Braden, for the presentation. We'll now hear comments from the bench, starting with Commissioner Gomez.
Thank you. Today's item strengthens the Commission's ability to protect our programs from the perpetrators of waste, fraud, and abuse. We are tasked with serving as responsible stewards of the federal funds we administer. Suspension and debarment are both helpful tools for us to deal with bad actors who should not be reaping the benefit of funds that support the Commission's goals of connecting all Americans, ensuring that connectivity is affordable, and providing communication services for people with disabilities. The appointment of an independent suspension and debarment officer will ensure objectivity in the process and make clear that our agency will not allow federal dollars to be diverted away from the consumers they are intended to serve. Thank you to the chairman for working with me on edits, and thank you to the Office of General Counsel and Paula for your work on this item.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Trusty.
Thank you. All Americans deserve access to modern communications networks and services. Achieving that goal requires advanced infrastructure deployed nationwide, including in underserved areas, and services that are accessible to individuals with disabilities. The FCC's funding programs are central to these efforts, and with that responsibility comes a clear obligation to protect these programs from waste, fraud, and abuse by ensuring that participants meet the highest standards of integrity and reliability. We owe this duty first and foremost to the public, whose contributions support these programs. The Universal Service Fund and Telecommunications Relay Service programs, for example, together distribute roughly $10 billion annually. Americans have every right to expect that these funds are used as Congress intended and not diverted or misused by bad actors. We also owe this duty to the program's beneficiaries. In my travels, I have seen firsthand the critical importance of connectivity and access, from visiting healthcare providers and schools in Mississippi and Alaska, to hearing from providers serving rural communities in Texas and Kansas, to seeing the work of TRS providers in Utah. The FCC funding programs advance vital statutory goals, and all program participants, from service providers to end users, depend on funds being used for their intended purpose. When untrustworthy actors remain eligible to participate in these programs, they put those outcomes at risk. Unwary beneficiaries may unexpectedly face disrupted service, denied support, or revoked funding. Strengthening our suspension and debarment processes helps prevent these harms and reinforces the efforts of beneficiaries to comply with the program requirements. Today's action is both necessary and timely. It's been nearly 20 years since the Commission last updated these rules. This order modernizes our framework by building on established government-wide rules while tailoring them to the FCC's unique programs and responsibilities. It also provides greater transparency and clarity so stakeholders understand how these processes work and what to expect. I look forward to seeing this process in action and to reviewing the record on what other improvements we might make to these rules in response to the further notice. I thank the Office of General Counsel and Paula for your great work on this item.
Thank you, Commissioners. The FCC has an obligation to be a good steward of federal dollars. Up to now, our suspension and debarment rules have only applied to the FCC's USF programs and have been limited to only some types of misconduct. Today's item fixes this by building on our other work to strengthen the integrity of our USF programs by proposing to apply the suspension and debarment safeguards more broadly into a wider range of misconduct. The item also promotes greater accountability and vigilance among program recipients, including by requiring them, their board members, and other company executives to disclose prior misconduct and ensure that the parties with whom they do business under our programs are not currently under suspension or debarment regulation. In doing so, we're making clear that bad actors who threaten our networks or misuse federal funds will not be allowed to participate in these programs going forward. So for all their great work on the item, I'd like to thank the General Counsel's Office, Tom Driscoll, Irene Lime, Wissam Naum, Braden Parker, Michael Scarato, especially Paula Superthal, Anjali Singh, Adam Kiandu, our General, Chin Yu, as well as everyone else that Adam recognized already in his opening statement. I look forward to moving this item forward. And with that, we'll proceed to a vote on the item. Commissioner Gomez?
Approve.
Commissioner Trustee?
Approve.
The chair votes to approve as well. The item is adopted with editorial privileges as requested. Madam Secretary, will you please announce the next, and I think last item on today's agenda?
Mr. Chairman and Commissioners, item 6 on your agenda is titled Rescinding Obsolete Provisions and will be presented by the Office of Economics and Analytics. Dr. Jonathan Williams, Chief Economist and Chief of the Office, will give the introduction.
Chief Williams, when you're ready, please proceed.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and Commissioners. The Office of Economics and Analytics is pleased to present for your consideration the most recent direct final rule to modernize the Commission's regulatory framework by deleting and updating rules found in Parts 1, 73, 90, and 95 that are either no longer used in practice or are otherwise outdated or unnecessary. Michelle Schaefer from the Office of Economics and Analytics will present the item.
Thank you very much. Good morning, Mr. Chairman and Commissioners. It's lovely to see you. Today we present the 7th direct final rule, continuing the Commission's delete proceeding. This direct final rule, if adopted, would repeal 18 rule provisions and modify 4 other rule provisions, totaling approximately 6,400 words and just over 10 pages in the Code of Federal Regulations. These rule provisions are found in Parts 1, 73, 90, and 95. The majority of these rules are managed by OEA's Auctions Division, though one rule is deleted from the Office of International Affairs. The rules have been updated and amended to reflect the deletions that are found in the rules managed by OEA, Wireless Bureau, and Media Bureau. Working with the other bureaus, we have determined that these provisions are ripe for removal because they either are no longer used in practice by the FCC, industry, or the public, or have become otherwise outdated and unnecessary. For example, we deleted Part 1 rule that requires upfront payments or bonds for Universal Service Fund auctions, which the Commission has not required for any Universal Service auction to date. We are also deleting a Part 1 rule that requires carriers to file reports that complied with a Part 43 rule that was eliminated nearly a decade ago, making the Part 1 rule obsolete. We delete another auctions-related rule in Part 1, defining unjust enrichment for installment payments, which have not been used since 1997, a long time ago. The Office of Economics and Analytics recommends the adoption of this item and requests editorial privileges to make technical and conforming edits. Thank you, Chairman and Commissioners.
Thank you, Michelle, for the presentation. We'll now hear comments from the bench, starting with Commissioner Gomez.
Jonathan, is this your first meeting presenting?
It is my first meeting. Thank you.
Well, welcome. I want to thank the staff of the Office of Economics and Analytics for their work on this item. However, as I have expressed before, I am sincerely concerned about the direct final rule process the Commission has been using to eliminate rules. Substantive rules adopted by the Commission pursuant to notice and comment should not be eliminated without the same due process. Several of the provisions being deleted today, as we heard, are obsolete or expired, and I concur with the order with regard to their deletion. For these reasons, I concur in part and dissent in part.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Trustee.
Thank you. Welcome, Jonathan. Go Heels. I won't have a formal statement for this item, but I want to thank the Office of Economics and Analytics for all the time and work that went into this item. Thank you.
Thanks. 1 year ago this month, we launched our delete proceeding, aiming at cutting the dead wood from the Code of Federal Regulations and eliminating rules that no longer serve the public interest. Today, we vote on our 7th direct final rule. And today's order will eliminate 18 rule provisions, over 6,000 words, and over 10 pages from Part 1 of the CFR. Many of these are outdated procedural rules that serve no purpose except to fatten up the rulebook. Now, looking back over this first year-long effort in our delete proceedings, the FCC has cut a total of over 1,200 rule provisions, almost 150,000 words in more than 330 pages of obsolete regulations. The vast majority of that dead wood is now gone. But we're not slowing down in our efforts. On deck for 2026, we're looking at licensing and permitting reform, eliminating unnecessary paperwork obligations, and breaking down technological silos that have held back innovations for decades. None of our work to date would be possible without the FCC's top-tier team. Their hard work to identify and eliminate wasteful rules is yielding great results. So for their work today on this item, I'd like to thank David Consul, Scott Bubalis, Mary Lovejoy, Gary Michaels, Kelly Quinn, Cameron Duncan, Michelle Wu Bailey, Haley Steffen, and Michelle Schaefer. Jonathan Williams, thanks to you as well. Congrats on your first presentation. And thanks to everyone that worked on this. We'll now proceed to a vote on the item, starting with Commissioner Gomez.
Concur in part and dissent in part.
Commissioner Trustee.
Approve.
The chair votes to approve as well. The item is adopted with editorial privileges as requested. And with that, would any of my colleagues like to make any announcements at this time, starting with Commissioner Gomez? Nothing? Commissioner Trustee? Yeah.
Okay, well, my one announcement is about our intern, Joseph Novacek. Please rise. So this is our spring intern, Joseph Novacek's last open meeting, and as you'll recall, he is a second-year law school student at Catholic University, and he is a member of the Law and Technology Institute. So Joseph has the distinction of being the first intern in our office, and he has been a tremendous asset, helping us to develop speeches, assembling briefing materials, and conducting research, among many other legal and policy contributions. And so although we are sad to see Joseph depart, he won't be far away. This summer, after he finishes exams and concludes his 2L year, Joseph will be interning at AT&T, and then he plans to go camping in the Adirondacks. So thank you to Joseph for all of your hard work and for all of your contributions. As you know, your future is very, very bright, and we look forward to staying in touch with you. Thank you.
Thanks. Okay, so today I'd like to announce and congratulate the winners of the FCC's 2025 Excellence in Economic Analysis and separately Excellence in Engineering Awards. These awards recognize staff who've made outstanding engineering, scientific, or technical contributions. First, our Excellence in Economic Analysis Award goes to Nicholas Copeland, Evan Kroll, as well as Paul LaFontaine from the Office of Economics and Analytics. Nick led the economic review of the agency's T-Mobile U.S. cellular transaction, providing rigorous analysis that ensured the deal would benefit consumers and advance the public interest as well. Evan and Paul both worked together to spearhead a forward-looking project exploring how market forces can drive efficiency and productivity in the space communications marketplace. Their innovative work will guide the Commission's approach to this rapidly evolving sector to come. So congratulations to them, and we'll have an award to hand them out here shortly as well. Next, our Excellence in Engineering Award goes to Barbara Pavin and Robert Acaccio from the Office of Engineering and Technology. Barbara and Robert have done outstanding work developing, improving, testing, and maintaining the FCC's Speed Test app. Their work keeps the broadband data collection programs running smoothly and helps us produce the accurate broadband maps that we need to close the digital divide. So Nicholas, Evan, Paul, Barbara, and Robert, thank you for your exceptional service, for your impact the work has had on the commission and the broader public. Congratulations to each of you, and we'll do our awards later on. Madam Secretary, will you please announce the next date for the commission's monthly agenda?
The next agenda meeting of the Federal Communications Commission is Thursday, April 30th, 2026.
Thanks. Until then, we stand adjourned.
All right, we'll be starting the chairman's press conference momentarily, so if you could please take your conversations outside, we're about ready to get started. All right. Thank you again for joining us. If you would please take your conversations outside, we're about ready to start the chairman's press conference. I really appreciate it. All right, thank you. All right, well, welcome to the chairman's press conference. As always, if you could please identify yourself as well as your outlet when you ask your question, we'd greatly appreciate it. And with that, I'll hand it over to the chairman.
Thanks. Great to see all of you today. It's been quite a busy last month since our last open meeting. Good to catch up on a number of topics. First, I'm really excited about a number of the proposals that we got across the finish line today. It was a really packed agenda with some great items. I'm excited in particular about our efforts to onshore call centers, bring those back to the U.S. I think it also helps us crack down on some of the illegal robocalls, so I think that was a great win to get that across the finish line. At the end of the day, I think American callers should expect and deserve to reach American call centers. So I'm glad we're moving forward with that. We also took action today to free up billions of dollars in private capital for new infrastructure builds by looking at our copper retirement regulations. I think that's going to pay dividends and really tie into our broader Build America agenda. We also took action this week to safeguard Americans and the communications networks we rely on. We did so by adding consumer-grade routers to the FCC's covered list following a national security determination from executive branch agencies. We put out a lot of information on that, some FAQs, and hopefully that provides a lot more clarity on where we're going there. Finally, it was an honor to join President Trump at the White House last week as he awarded the Commander-in-Chief's Trophy to the Navy football team, and he signed a historic executive order to preserve the Army-Navy game. This Army-Navy game stands as a symbol of excellence and part of our great national spirit. I think it's important that we preserve that time for the Army-Navy game. So I look forward to working with Secretary Lutnick, as the executive order calls for, to make sure that that second Saturday in December is reserved exclusively for America's game. With that, happy to open it up and take your questions.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman. Kelsey Griffiths with Bloomberg News. I wanted to see if you could explain why the FCC was the agency that took the lead on divestitures in the Nexstar Tegna proceeding, when that is usually a role that the DOJ plays. If I could, my other question is on foreign-made routers, what criteria will you use to grant exemptions, and have you received any requests yet?
So starting with routers, there is an exemption process. It's actually going to be run by Department of War, Pentagon, and DHS. So the request will go to them. They'll make the decision as to whether the exceptions are met, and then that determination will then filter back to us. Ours is more of a ministerial job. They made the decision about the national security threat. We've added to the covered list, and then they will decide, the contours of the exceptions. So we encourage people to work directly with those two organizations on this. In terms of Nexstar Tegna, obviously, feel free to reach out to Department of Justice for their review. They reviewed the matter. They closed their transaction. Nexstar offered to divest in 6 markets. We accepted their offer to divest in those 6 markets, and ultimately, the upshot of those divestments was it created a situation in which you have no more than 2 top 2 stations plus 1, no more than 2 top 4 stations plus one outside of the top four. And we thought, based on those divestitures, and that we were in a good spot to move forward with the transaction.
Monty Taylor, Com Daily. The Media Bureau's Nexstar Tegna order says that a case-by-case review is better than a big, broad national cap. Does that mean you don't plan to go after the cap? And also, some groups have said that if you do get rid of the national cap, the FCC needs to lower restrictions on MVPDs to balance the scales with the broadcasters. Is that something you're going to do?
Lower restrictions on MVPDs?
Yeah, that they, do something to like maybe increase the good faith rules or something, balance the scales if the broadcasters are allowed to get so much bigger.
Stepping back for a second on Nexstar Tegna and on the broadcast issues as a general matter, I look a lot at newspapers as sort of a canary in the coal mine for the broader broadcast industry. If you look back the last couple of decades, newspapers have closed by the dozen in communities all across the country. I think the statistics show that for every 100,000 Americans, they used to have access to 3 newspapers, and now that's down to something like 1.6. So newspapers are shuttering. The reporters that were hired by newspapers lost their jobs. The statistics show tens of thousands of journalists lost their jobs over the last several years and decade. I think if we care as a policy matter in this country about having local news, local reporting, gumshoe journalists, the place that's taking place right now, more than any other place, is the reporters that are attached to local broadcast TV stations. Again, particularly with the newspapers having shuttered. So when you look at this massive secular decline in reporters, and you look at the future of the broadcast TV industry, I think it's imperative as a national policy matter that we should want a healthy, thriving, local broadcast TV market. And when you look at newspapers again, the FCC had rules on the books that stopped broadcasters from investing in newspapers at a point in time in which they were really in decline. The FCC kept those rules on the books until 2017, and I don't think they were finally off the books until the 2021 Prometheus decision in the Supreme Court. Now, newspapers face a lot of challenges, the internet, Craigslist, but I think the FCC standing by the wayside and preventing newspapers from scaling in light of all those dynamics certainly didn't help. And for my part, I think we should give broadcasters, local TV stations in particular, a fighting chance in this new frothy media environment. And so I think it makes sense. We're still taking a look at the national cap. We haven't made a final decision there. I do think, to your point, this is a rule that the FCC has said over and over again is a rule, and any rule can be waived when the waiver standard is met, and that's a case-by-case review in terms of application of the waiver standard. And so whatever harms the cap is designed to do as a rule, it stops all transactions from being reviewed by the FCC, good transactions and bad transactions alike. And so I think whether it's a waiver or otherwise, being able to take a case-by-case look at transactions makes sense. Transactions that are in the public interest, we can let through. Transactions that aren't, we can stop. But moving into that sort of a more refined approach is better. And frankly, if you look at the history of the FCC's approach to a lot of sectors, including media regulation, that's the trend line we've gone from. We've gone from hard and fast ex-ante regulations that, again, keep good deals and bad deals out alike, to a more refined approach. We've done that in radio. We've done that in cable context. And I think it makes sense to extend that same approach into broadcast, where if there's a deal that's in the public interest, that's good for localism, competition, diversity, the 3 historic touchstones of our media policy, then we should let that deal go through. And if there's a deal that's less than the cap or more than the cap that is contrary to those goals, then we shouldn't let it through. And I think that's a better approach for us to be taking.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman. Brianna Frank with USA Today. Last month you mentioned that there was an enforcement action against ABC in line with equal time rules after The View interviewed State Representative James Tallarico. My understanding of that rule is that it's triggered if an opposing candidate in an election requests it. So can you talk more about what that enforcement action was, and was this a preemptive action by the FCC instead of being at the request of another candidate? Representative Jasmine Crockett's office said that she had not, that they had not made a request to ABC.
Yeah. So the way the equal time rule operates is assuming that you're not qualified for an exception, a bona fide news program. The FCC rules say that, I believe it's as soon as possible, that's what the rule says, that you've had a legally qualified candidate on a program, you have to file in your political file an equal time notice. And then the filing of that equal time notice is what triggers a window for other legally qualified candidates to seek out and obtain their comparable time and placement. So the triggering event after the appearance is not a request from an opposing candidate. The very next thing that's supposed to happen is as soon as possible. I think we've usually said it's like within 24 hours usually. You need to make that filing. So after that appearance, at least with respect to the Disney-owned TV station, they didn't make any filing indicating that there had been a legally qualified candidate for office on. Now, that's actually different than other affiliated stations in Texas that ran it. So if you look at, I think every single TV station other than the one owned by Disney that ran that program did in fact ultimately file a notice regarding the appearance by James Tallarico. So I think it was 20 or 21 TV stations in Texas filed in their political file a notice that that happened, and that would have created the legal opportunity for others to take advantage of it. But it's the event, then the notice, then the person can seek out the right. And if they don't seek out the right within that period of time, then effectively there's no action at that point. So.
And can you talk a little bit more about what the enforcement action was taken?
Well, it's ongoing right now. So we have lots of enforcement tools that are available to the FCC. We have our version of subpoenas, which are letters of inquiry. And at this point, I'll just say that, we have had taken some enforcement measures with respect to Disney and The View. And again, as a general matter, what we've encouraged people to do is to, if you believe you qualify for an exception to equal time, for instance, if you're claiming that you're bona fide news, we've encouraged people to file petitions for declaratory ruling with the FCC, which is a practice that's been used before. And the FCC, in an open, transparent process, can adjudicate that asserted claim of bona fide news. So we're still in the midst of this enforcement proceeding. We've taken certain steps. We're going to be taking others here soon, and no more to announce publicly on that, but it is an enforcement matter at this point.
Back to John.
Hey, John Hendel with Politico. You've talked a lot about the balance of power in the media kind of ecosystem, and especially affiliates versus networks. And you collected comment on some of those different pieces kind of late last year. You've also talked in the process of that about wanting to kind of help some of the local affiliate stations, preempt programming a little more easily. That's come up at some of your recent events too, where you've talked about kind of how preemption was previously used. How close are you at this point to figuring out what that might look like? I mean, is preemption something you're hoping to focus a little bit more on, this spring? Kind of where is that right now, given it's been a couple of months now? I'm just curious what that could look like.
Right. We had a proceeding where we sought comment on that affiliate network relationship. There was a lot of actually interesting ideas put into that proceeding, and I've asked the team to go through that, and we're actually putting together various options at this point, either near term or potentially rulemakings. But as a general matter, it wasn't that long ago that it was fairly routine for local broadcast TV stations to preempt, to push back on the programming being offered by the national programmers who are usually operating out of New York and Hollywood. And it created a really healthy system where the local broadcast TV stations that have the public interest obligation, that have a pulse of the community that they're licensed to serve, can take the feedback from their local community and provide that to the national program and say, this program isn't the right fit for this community right now. And so we saw preemption of entire seasons of various national programming before. We've seen preemption of particular shows for particular periods of time. But there's a very healthy feedback loop when the local broadcasters could not just communicate their concerns with the national program, but if need be, actually preempt. And I think we were better off for that. We've lost that. I think a lot of that goes back to the power, for instance, that national programmers have accumulated. I think it goes back to the national programmers being able to threaten the revocation of affiliate agreements and potentially affiliating with a different station in the same market. I think if you are engaging in punitive conduct that effectively undermines the right to preempt, I think that's something the FCC should look at. Again, you have a right in the FCC's rules to preempt national programmers, the broadcasters do. So if you exercise that right, and as a result, you get your affiliation with the national programmer pulled, I think that effectively undermines the rule itself. So that's one area where we're looking potentially, is maybe you create a presumption, for instance, that if someone exercises a preemption right and a broadcaster revokes an affiliation shortly after, that it's sort of a presumption that's being done in contravention of the ability to exercise that CFR right to preempt, and maybe we can take a look at that. But there's lots of ideas that are coming up in that proceeding that we're looking at, because again, I do think we need to get, again, it's not something new, but just get back to where we were a decade or so ago, where there was that healthier feedback loop.
Chairman, Ted Johnson from Deadline. You've had a back and forth with California Governor Gavin Newsom on X, and I wanted to ask you about a post you had yesterday. You wrote that he's simply doing the bidding of his liberal Hollywood donors, the billionaires in media, who have no interest in the FCC holding them accountable to their statutory public interest obligations. What specific billionaires in media are you referring to?
The liberal billionaires in media.
But specifically,
right there.
names, and also what examples do you have of them forcing their radical worldview on viewers in a way that flouts their license obligations?
Again, I think there's no question that over the last decade or so, this balance of power that we were talking about shifted from local TV stations licensed in communities across the country to the national programs. We see this massive decrease in preemption. You've seen other issues in terms of financial relationships between local broadcasters and programmers. And my North Star in media is how do we constrain the power of these national programmers, re-empower local broadcasts? And it's clear to me that Governor Newsom is doing everything possible to distract from his own track record in California, where billions of dollars are wasted. There's massive fraud, bridges to nowhere, tremendous problems. So he's happy to talk on X about anything other than his own record. And it's clear to me that, he's doing the bidding of his liberal billionaire donors in Hollywood who don't like the idea that the FCC is enforcing the public interest standard as we used to do for the first time in many, many years. But we're going to keep at it. And again, look, I think the further removed you are from the operation of a local broadcast television station, the more you see this wailing and gnashing of teeth. If you talk to actual broadcasters, they understand there's a public interest standard. They understand there's a news distortion policy. There's a broadcast hoax rule. And when I use those language, they know exactly what we're talking about because it's in the FCC case law. But the further removed you are from the operation, it seems very foreign to people and they struggle to understand it. But this is just what the FCC law has been for a long time.
But your statement seems to suggest you have people in mind when you talk about billionaires in media who have no interest in the FCC holding them accountable.
You have a lot of people in mind, yeah.
You want to name them?
We'll see if I log on to social media again and get more specific.
Okay.
It's Jeremy Barr from The Guardian. Do you mean Bob Iger, or what is it? Yeah. So you talked a little bit about, empowering local broadcast television stations, but to go back to one of your tweets from March 14th about broadcasters must operate in the public interest and they will lose their license if they're not, aren't you kind of threatening the local stations themselves by saying they might lose their license, or are you kind of referring to the national stations and then they're losing their owned and operated licenses?
Well, there's both things going on. There's licensed TV stations that are owned independently from the national programmers, and then, as you noted, there's owned and operated. And every single station, whether you're owned and operated or you're affiliated, have the public interest obligation. And I think it's important, even for those that aren't owned and operated, to understand, again, this is FCC rules, you're 100% responsible for what comes out. If you think running this program right now is the great fit and in the public interest for your community, go for it. And if you think that it's not, then you have an obligation to take action. If there ends up being an instance in which an affiliated or owned and operated station isn't operating in the public interest, of course, license revocation is something that is always on the table. If it's not, then it's not a license, it's a property right. And so I think it's good that people are mindful now that there are things they have to do. Again, I think the closer you are to broadcast, the more this makes sense, and the further away you get, it seems like odd concepts, and I get that. I think from a consumer perspective, maybe from a regular politician perspective, you see a screen, and it could be broadcast, it could be YouTube, it could be anything, but there's a very different underlying regulatory framework if you're broadcast versus a cable show versus a streamer, and we're going to hold broadcasters accountable.
Just really quickly, I mean, do you see your role as chairman of the FCC as someone who is going to weigh in on coverage of, press coverage? Because you were retweeting President Trump's post about Iran coverage. I mean, do you view yourself as someone who is appraising media coverage and the quality of it? And are there certain issues specifically that you saw with coverage of the Iran war that made you say that thing about licenses?
Yeah. Well, my post didn't mention Iran war coverage, but I'll simply say the job of the FCC is to hold broadcasters accountable to the public interest standards. That means no broadcast hoax, no news distortion, identifying and responding to the needs of your local community. And that's the standard that we're going to hold broadcasters accountable to.
Morning. Diego Munoz, Punchbowl News. Senate Commerce Committee Chairman Ted Cruz said that the Nexstar Tegna deal should have gone through a full commission vote and not the Media Bureau. Can you respond to him and explain why it went through the Media Bureau and not the vote? And zooming out, can you speak about your relationship with the chairman? You guys started on the same page with Spectrum last year, and it seems like you've been at odds on a couple of different issues since then.
Oh, I don't know about that. I think, Chairman Cruz is doing a phenomenal job. I've done, visits with him in his states, and he's, pushing a really important, beneficial agenda out of the Commerce Committee. I think we have a great relationship. A lot of the stuff that we're doing here at the FCC picks up on the issues and the ideas either that he has legislation on or that he's otherwise articulated, and we're getting that stuff across the finish line here. And so I think it's a great relationship. This was a decision by the staff. Staff decisions are initial decisions. They're not final decisions. There may, in fact, be a commission vote on this. There's been an application for review seeking full commission review of that decision. That may happen. So there may be a commission vote on this at the end of the day. This decision by the Bureau was consistent with agency precedent and practice if you look at similar scope and scale of transactions. And now there's litigation playing out both in California and the D.C. Circuit, and we're going to be responding to all of that.
Thank you. Hey, Mr. Chairman, Nancy Scola, I'm writing here for Washingtonian Magazine. I'd also like to ask you about that post on war coverage that was referenced earlier. There's one line in particular you wrote, where a political candidate is able to win a landslide election victory, after, in the face of hoaxes and distortions, there's something very wrong. Can you just explain a little bit more what you mean about that dynamic?
Well, look, I think when you have someone running and there's 97% negative coverage and that person still wins, there's clearly a mismatch between the focus in the operations of the legacy media and where the communities all across the country are. That's a huge gap between those two things. And at the end of the day, what we're looking at the FCC is making sure that licensed local broadcasters are understanding the needs of their local communities, are responding to the needs of those local communities, and that's what we're going to hold people accountable to. But again, stepping back, you see this trust in legacy news media just continuing to crater. I think the latest survey that I saw had it down to 9% in terms of people have a great deal of trust in the media. So whether there's a change that comes because of the FCC enforcing the public interest standard, or just as a general business matter, I think the legacy media needs to change. Again, jobs are declining, ratings are declining, trust is declining. You've now got these weird podcast microphones popping up on cable news shows. I think it's good that people are trying to do something different. I think it's great what CBS is doing. They're trying to do something different. Again, the legacy media isn't happy about that, right? The legacy media likes to move like a school of fish. They don't really care if they're right or if they're wrong. They just want to be together in a pack, and that's the safety that they've enjoyed for so long. And whenever anybody tries to do something different, whether it ends up being a good thing or a bad thing, they're not happy about it. So I think it's good that we're seeing a bit more diversity and people trying to do things different. I just think it's good for the industry.
So the idea would be if a candidate's getting 50% of the vote, they should get something near 50% of the news coverage? Is that sort of the?
I don't know. Look, again, the question is, are you identifying the needs of your community and are you responding to it? And if, a broadcaster is coming out with, 90% coverage this direction, but their local community, really sort of views things very differently, are you really sort of identifying and responding to the needs of those community members? Those are sort of issues that I think ultimately pull back into just the normal practical review of public interest obligations. Yeah.
Thank you.
Hi, Josh Kosman, Capital Forum. Are you considering a stay? You know, there was obviously, an emergency application filed with the FCC for a stay in Nexstar. It sounds like you just said that there's still the possibility of a commission vote. What is the possibility of, what's the status of the stay?
Well, there was a request for stay, I believe, filed on Friday, almost a week ago, that requested a 24-hour turnaround from the FCC. Obviously, we did not issue a stay within those 24 hours, and the parties have now moved on to the court, and they've asked the court for effectively a stay. Now, you can't take an appeal of a bureau-level decision, but they've brought in claims under the All Writs Act, which is a pretty high bar to get relief. But they've now sought that same type of relief from court, and the FCC had a filing, I think it was due right now at noon. So you can see what we said in that filing, but at this point, in the near term at least, it's teed up for briefing in that court case. But, look, I think, again, in terms of legal authority question that's at issue there, the D.C. Circuit, where this is, has already addressed the issue of the language in the Communications Act that says, the FCC shall modify its rule to X percent. And when the court took this up, I think it was a Fox case around 2000, they said that language was merely a starting point for the FCC's analysis, that modify your rule to X was not a statutory limit. It seems like an odd result on a facial reading. You can look at the statute. The statute says the FCC shall modify its rule to X, and you say, oh, it's in a statute. Could it be a statutory bar? But the court's already looked at it and said, no, Congress just directed the FCC to change its rule. Congress then came in and said the FCC doesn't have to look at that rule provision every 2 years in the biennial review, and it doesn't have to do it against this thumb on the scale for eliminating it, which is what happened in the biennial review, is you had to remove it if you didn't find it was in the public interest. But Congress otherwise left in place the idea that it's a rule, not a statute, and otherwise left in place our authority to change our rule. And so that's how we've approached it. All set? Yes. Okay. Thanks all. Appreciate it.
All right, thank you, everybody. We're now going to move on to our Bureau press conference, where we'll answer questions based on the items voted on today, and I'll hand it over to my colleague, Will Wyquist. Thank you.
Thank you, Katie. Happy opening day. So we're going to go through the items on the agenda today, take questions on them specifically. If you have any questions, we'll call up the bureaus or offices for those items. So first up, Consumer Governmental Affairs Bureau on the call center item. Do we have any questions on that? No? Monty? Looking at you. Ed? I like how you left some mystery there, Monty.
I was getting ready to head out the door, Monty. I mean,
I'm so sorry. Monty Taylor, Com Daily. I just wanted to know if there were any changes to this item from the initial draft.
yes. So in the presentation of the item, we did list one of the changes, and that is the introduction of a proposal around disclosing call center percentages as part of the consumer broadband label. So that's one of the changes that you'll see when the item's released later.
And were there any other ones, though?
There may have been a few other ones in response to ex partes and other things, but that's the change of significance.
Any other questions on this item? Thank you.
All right, thanks.
All right, next up, we're going to do both the Wireline Bureau items together. So that's the numbering item and the Modernizing Networks item. Questions on those? Yep. All right, Joseph.
Hi, Monty.
Monty Taylor, Com Daily. On the copper retirement item, I think both Commissioner Gomez and Commissioner Trusty mentioned that they got some changes in the item, and I was hoping you could talk about what those were.
Sure, yeah. As the commissioners and the chairman himself said, this was a very collaborative item up until, I think, this morning. Changes were circulating. Most of those were about, there were some changes on fine-tuning the expectations associated with 911 connectivity during a network change or discontinuance, descriptions of the services and the categories eligible for streamlined processing, the application content requirements to minimize burdens on providers, and clarifying the scope of state and local laws and requirements that may be subject to preemption when they conflict with important federal policy articulated in the item.
Any other questions on these items? Great, thank you. All right, next, the Space Bureau item on cutting-edge missions. Monty, Jay, or whoever wants to handle it. I have the predictable Com Daily question. Have there been changes since the draft? And what were those?
There were a few small acknowledgments of the several ex partes that came in. No.
Any other questions on this item? Thank you. Thank you all. All right, next up, General Counsel's Office on the Debarment suspension. Monty, okay? General? Monty didn't want to leave you out, so.
I can't imagine there'll be too much on those, but who knows?
Everybody likes to talk about the changes.
As usual, it was primarily cleanup edits and conforming changes. There were some mechanical changes in the rules appendices to ensure that the agency is adopting the most current OMB version of the regs that our procedures reference, but that was about it.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions on the item? Thank you all. And last but certainly not least, the deletion item from Office of Economics and Analytics. Nope, okay. You guys are off the hook. Thank you very much. And with that, I will hand it off to Commissioner Gomez. Thank you all and happy opening day.
Time is it? Good afternoon. Last week's rushed closed-door approval of the unlawful Nexstar Tegna merger is just the latest example of what I call the billionaire bypass. If you are a billionaire with business before a government agency and a perceived friend of the White House, your transaction will get fast-track approval. We saw it with the Paramount Skydance transaction, where the FCC immediately approved the deal after Skydance agreed to make CBS more friendly to this administration and after CBS paid to settle a bogus lawsuit. We are seeing it play out again with the proposed Warner Brothers Discovery and Paramount merger. And we saw it last week with a $6.2 billion deal that sailed through multiple levels of regulatory scrutiny in a single day. If you are a billionaire, tell me who you know and what you believe, and I will tell you how fast your deal gets approved. Meanwhile, smaller transactions from less connected companies filed months earlier are still waiting. This is not a coincidence, it is a pattern. And it tells you exactly who this FCC is working for. And it is certainly not the vast majority of American consumers. Now let me tell you why the Nexstar Tegna approval was also flatly illegal. Congress set the national broadcast ownership cap at 39% of American homes. It reaffirmed that limit 3 times over 20 years, most recently in 2004, when it explicitly stripped the FCC of any authority to waive or modify it. The law is not ambiguous. The FCC cannot rewrite it. It cannot ignore it. Yet that is exactly what the Media Bureau did last week under bureaucratic cover with no open process and no public accountability. The Media Bureau also had no authority to make this call in the first place. Under the FCC's own rules, decisions to raise new and novel questions must go before the full commission, not be waved through at the Bureau level. A transaction of this magnitude, one that raises unresolved questions of federal law that the Commission has never previously decided, required open deliberation before all sitting commissioners. Instead, it got a quiet sign-off designed to avoid public scrutiny. The consequences will be felt in living rooms and newsrooms across the country.
Viewers will see fewer reporters, fewer local stories, and two stations in the same market that look and sound exactly the same, and sometimes three. That means less competition and less accountability. Aside from closing newsrooms, even before this transaction closed, Nexstar has publicly said it expects to collect hundreds of millions in new fees from this deal. Consumers will be the ones left to pay for that, through higher bills, fewer voices, and less accountability to the communities these stations are licensed to serve. That is the real cost of the billionaire bypass. But this billionaire bypass is only half the story. The other half is that what this FCC does to those it considers enemies, and what we can all do to stop for falling for their tricks. While billionaire-backed companies get fast-track approvals, broadcasters who cover this administration critically get threats. This is regulatory harassment designed to make journalists and their corporate parents think twice before airing a story that this White House does not like. Let me be clear about what the FCC can and cannot do. The FCC licenses local broadcast stations. It does not license networks. No licenses are up for renewal until 2028. Early renewal attempts are exceedingly rare, and any effort to revoke a license over news coverage would almost certainly fail in court. These threats are not grounded in law, and they would not survive judicial scrutiny. But that is exactly the point. The threat is the point. Out of the many politically motivated FCC investigations targeting perceived government critics, not a single one has resulted in an enforcement action. Zero. The FCC is a paper tiger. Its powers are limited, and these investigations will go nowhere. Ultimately, what the public will remember is who complied in advance and who stood firm. Broadcasters, journalists, and the public must recognize these threats for what they are and call that bluff. Thank you. I'll take your questions.
Hi, Commissioner Gomez. Kelsey Griffiths with Bloomberg News. I wanted to ask if you could walk us through the divestiture process or how you understood that played out for Nexstar Tegna.
I don't have insight into how the divestiture process worked. So I can't actually do that.
Monty Taylor, Daily. Chairman Carr just said that the bureau level action is not a final order of the FCC, and it could still be potentially voted by the commission. Do you believe that to be true? Could it be voted by will it be voted by the commission?
Well, that's two different questions.
Yeah, I guess I'm asking the second one.
Because, yeah, petitions for review are voted on by the full commission. I don't set the agenda. And so the question is, will it be voted on? And that's something that I think you would have to ask the chairman, not me, because I
think he was saying that the Nexstar Tegna order is up for review, and then the full commission could potentially vote on it.
Well, the full commission would have to vote on a petition for review. But the question is, what would the timing be of that?
Right.
And I just don't know the answer to that. Mm-hmm. We could do it today.
Hey, Commissioner Gomez. John Handel with Politico. Just wanted to ask a little bit about what you think of the chairman's descriptions of kind of the balance of power in the media market. That has kind of been a recurring theme he has come back to. He's talked about the affiliates kind of versus the networks. He's brought up preemption as part of that. What's been your reaction when you've heard his descriptions, and how does that fit into your, your sense of what's been going on?
So this administration and this FCC is using whatever powers it has, whatever regulatory levers it has, in order to change how broadcasters broadcast news content, entertainment content. If they don't like it, they want to use those regulatory levers. And the problem is, any of these actions that we're talking about always come down to the content of the broadcasts. And the commission, decades ago, when it eliminated the fairness doctrine, determined that any such regulation of broadcast content would violate the First Amendment. That is why we no longer have a fairness doctrine. So what matters is that the end goal of the FCC, through regulatory threats, through regulatory actions, is actually to alter content. And that is what's inappropriate. And again, doing so under this vague public interest standard that has not been defined is a problem, because the way I read it is the public interest standard is it's in the public interest if we like it, and it's against the public interest if we don't like it. And that is a violation of the First Amendment and totally inappropriate for the commission to be engaging in efforts to change content in this way.
Commissioner Ted Johnson from Deadline. As Chairman Carr has been criticized for some of his attacks on the networks and broadcasters, I've seen him and some of his allies bring up the case of the Fox affiliate in Philadelphia and how that process dragged out, that license renewal dragged out. And I think I've even seen references to why didn't you speak out at the time? I was wondering if you could address that.
So the Fox affiliate case was filed. It was not an enforcement proceeding. It was not something that the FCC initiated. Instead, it was a license renewal petition to deny a license renewal based on the qualifications of the owner of that particular broadcast station. And unlike these enforcement cases, which have been revived, as you may recall, which the last administration actually dismissed because none of them brought valid claims of a violation of our rules, this was a petition to deny a renewal. And the commission eventually denied that petition to deny the renewal, as it denied the other complaints that were bogus complaints brought against these other broadcast stations. So what I will tell you every time someone tries to say that this is the same thing is you have not seen the most powerful media regulator in the country go after content that displeases this administration the way that this administration has done it. And you have not seen them inappropriately use the enforcement authority of the FCC to go after content that it doesn't like. This is by all measures, the violations of our First Amendment by this administration are so much more obvious, I guess obvious is the wrong word, are so much more severe than any alleged violation with regard to the timing of the dismissal of a petition to deny is just beyond comparison. So I would say let's focus on what's happening at the FCC today, which is threats to broadcasters are leading to the chilling of speech and our reporters' rights to report without fear or favor, to push back against this administration. And it's also denying the public the right to see reporting and content as well of their choice. And that is a violation of the First Amendment and the Act's prohibitions on censorship of broadcasters.
Hi, Commissioner. Brianna Frank with USA Today. Sort of following up on that, in the chairman's press briefing, I asked about the enforcement action against ABC after The View had an interview with Texas Representative James Tallarico. The chairman seemed to describe that as more of a procedural issue, that some of these stations had not submitted the filing that they'd had a candidate to, open the window for opposing candidates to request time. I'm curious if you similarly see that as a procedural issue, or if that's in line with what you've been talking about along the lines of press intimidation.
It's clear that this administration and this FCC is using the equal time rule as a way to harass broadcasters for content that it disfavors. The equal time rule it covers all broadcasters. Let's start with that, whether friends or foes of this administration. And what it does is it makes access available to all legally qualified candidates to comparable time on the broadcast station. But we have the bona fide news exemption. And nothing has changed other than a Bureau public notice declaring that there was a change in how we treat these talk shows and bona fide interviews of candidates. We still have the same standard for when the equal time rule applies and when a bona fide news exemption applies. So what you are seeing is just inappropriate misapplication of commission precedent and commission rules.
Jeremy Barr from The Guardian. Talking about chilling, I mean, there was a report, chilling speech. There was a report in the Hollywood Reporter. And there was a report in the Hollywood Reporter about how The View has had very few politicians on. I think they had someone on this week, maybe, but there's been a lot less. So would you consider that to be an example of networks taking action?
Well, I mean, I don't know because I have not spoken to anyone from The View ever. But I mean, the problem here is exactly what your question is premised on, and that is there will be chilling. There will be chilling, and that stations are going to think twice, the networks are going to think twice. Is it worth the hassle? And there were good reasons why we had these exemptions, why Congress allowed the exemptions. And what we're seeing, if it's true that they're not having candidates on because they fear some type of enforcement action from the FCC against local stations, then that is exactly the chilling effect that's a problem. And that, in the end, is a disservice to viewers and listeners. Remember, it applies to radio too.
Hi, Commissioner Diego Munoz from Punchbowl. So the Commerce Committee Chairman Ted Cruz has once again criticized Chairman Carr, saying that there should have been a commission vote. What do you think Congress can do? You've been very critical of this FCC's agenda. Do you want Congress to stand up to the FCC more? Is there anything they can do? What would you want them to do?
Well, there's things the FCC can do, but there's also things Congress can do. And one of the things that Congress can do is it can actually amend the Communications Act to make very clear what it means to serve in the public interest, whether it's for us to take actions in the public interest or for local broadcasters to serve in the public interest. We need guardrails because what we are seeing is an abuse of a very vague standard in order to go after content this administration doesn't like. Hi, Commissioner Nancy Skoll. I'm writing for Washingtonian Magazine. The chairman talked about the idea that if a candidate receives 50% of the vote, in a perfect world, they get 50% of news coverage, and he thinks that's a very skewed landscape. Do you disagree with his diagnosis of that as a problem, or simply the solution, that it's not the FCC's role to correct something, even if there is an imbalance? I'm not sure, in what context? He had posted this about war coverage, and he said it was a little bit of a complex sentence he posted, but the idea was if somebody is able to win elections, even if they get overwhelmingly negative news coverage, something's very wrong in the system. I asked him about it earlier. It was a reference to President Trump. If he gets overwhelmingly negative news coverage and still manages to win elections, the commissioner said there's something very wrong in the landscape. And then, his obvious sort of next step is the FCC should use its tools to do something about it. Do you think that it is actually a problem in the media landscape, or is it simply like this isn't something that we should be concerned about, or is it that the FCC, it's not, even if it is a problem, it's not the FCC's job to fix it? Thank you. I missed that. Well, let's start with why we have our public interest rules in place, or our policies for licensing broadcasters, radio and television. One of those policies is diversity of viewpoints. We want to make sure that we have a diversity of viewpoints, and we see that throughout the media ecosystem. The problem is that this administration wants to only have one viewpoint. You see that with these mergers, which are going to lead to one viewpoint. You see that with protection of radio stations, which tend to lean conservative. You see that with the attacks on the networks that are left that have not become friends of this administration. And importantly, of course, to your question, is the First Amendment prohibits us from taking action in order to ensure that candidates are fairly, based on their popularity, covered. That is content regulation right there. And we don't want the media to just become a propaganda machine. We want the media to push back and make us uncomfortable because they ask good questions, like the one you just asked.
Josh Kosman, Capitol Forum. Do you believe, Chairman Carr just said that the FCC, I think, just filed with the district court about the stay in the Nexstar case. I would safely assume he does not believe there should be a stay, or the FCC does not. Do you believe there should be a stay?
I didn't see whatever it was that we filed. I think that the FCC's media order was unlawful, and it was unlawful for the many reasons that I mentioned during my opening statement. The problem is that time is on the side of the transaction itself. The longer this goes, the more difficult it's going to be to actually do something about this illegal order. So I will watch with interest to see what happens.
Do you think, I mean, obviously you're aware that Newsmax and others petitioned for an emergency stay. In 24 hours, the FCC didn't take action. Now it's in the courts. They've already filed in the court for that emergency stay. Even if you feel, or as you feel, it's an illegal action, do you feel, just from a legal perspective, that they ought to get that emergency stay?
Yeah, I haven't looked carefully at what their arguments are, but I am very interested to see where this goes. Okay?
Yeah, Monty Taylor, Com Daily. On the copper retirement thing today, Public Knowledge put out a statement that they don't like it. And they said that it's going to put people at risk and cut corners. Do you have any reaction to that? You approve this, I believe.
Yeah, I did approve it after working very hard to get a more balanced order that would help us make sure that we protect public safety, that we ensure we have pro-competitive measures in place for interconnection, and finally, that we ensure that any consumers that are stranded have a way to get relief. It did not go as far as I would have liked, but because I was able to work with the chairman's office to address so many of my concerns, that is why I was able to approve the order. Thank you.